Welcome back to the deep dive. You've shared with us an extraordinarily dense and detailed collection of source material.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. It feels less like reading about characters and more like being granted direct access to the operating system of the human mind under extreme duress.
What's so fascinating here is the sheer level of the documentation. I mean, it's obsessive. It's an almost clinical chronicling of these mental states that range from the neurotically trivial all the way to the psychically devastating.
Right. And it maps the external world. You get brand names, precise geography, these absurd missions. But it feels like that's only there to highlight how chaotic and isolated the internal experience really is.
Exactly. The exterior world is, charted with painful precision, but the interior world is this raging silent storm.
So our mission today is to serve as your expert guides through all this hyper-articulate material. We're going to be exploring these moments of, physical and psychic transition.
And charting that brutal tension between the external absurdity and the crushing internal reality.
We're going to focus really intensely on how this reliance on granular specificity, telling you exactly what something smells like, or the precise brand of oil that caused a collapse, how that actually underscores the fundamental isolation of these characters.
We're looking for the failures of language, the points where all that description, all that detail just cannot bridge the gap between a person's self and the world.
Okay, let's unpack this dense journey, and we're starting with the post-seizure delusion of poor Tony Krause.
Poor Tony Krause. Yeah.
He is our entry point. And he immediately, right away, he demonstrates this tragicomic dissonance that just defines this entire archive. He's just recovered from a neural electric event, a grand mal seizure, and he's experiencing what the source calls the infamous deceptive post-seizure feeling of well-being.
And that's not just relief, is it? It's something more profound.
It's a physiological high, right, a neurological phenomena.
It is. The source has a great term for it, something like a broken fever, high-hearted reversal of fortune.
A reversal of fortune. Yeah. To really get why that's so potent for poor Tony, you have to start with the specific relief he feels.
Exactly. The source just says he awakes lizardless and continent.
Which is such a powerful phrase.
It's everything, isn't it? It's the immediate, physiological relief from all the shame, the physical chaos of the seizure, the total loss of dignity that comes with withdrawal. Suddenly, the body that just betrayed him has reversed course.
He feels right as rain.
Right as rain.
And he immediately weaponizes this temporary high right there in front of the paramedics. He launches into this performance of recovery.
A total performance.
The source details the interaction with the blue-jawed attendant, where poor Tony engages in these certain body entendres on expressions like vital signs and dilation. He's putting on a show.
He's using wit to assert control over a clinical situation where he just had none. It's an intellectual and a physical defiance.
The physical part is key.
It is. He is so high on this neurochemical surge that he literally cancels the crash cart request and starts manipulating his skinny arms in a way that's described as a parodic minimal mambo.
A minimal mambo. He's dancing.
He's dancing his way out of medical necessity. And this is so crucial. He chooses his own subjective internal feeling that right as rain certainty over the objective professional caution of the paramedic.
Who warns him?
Who explicitly warns him this feeling is notoriously deceptive and transient. Tony is betting his life on a temporary neurological glitch.
Which brings us to this sort of structural critique that's embedded in this section, the astonishing paradox of destitution. The hospital, Cambridge City Hospital specifically, it defers to his wishes not to stay.
It shows what the source calls an inverted respect.
Inverted respect. So why? Why is this inverted respect afforded to him?
Well, it's a devastating piece of social commentary, isn't it? The hospital, which, it operates under the bureaucratic pressure of liability and cost, it honors his quixotic will not to stay.
Why?
Because of his status. His health card is expired and not even in your name.
So his poverty gives him a kind of freedom.
A perverse, dangerous freedom. By honoring his subjective claim of well-being, the hospital effectively removes the burden of long-term care, a follow-up of all the paperwork from their plate.
So they just let him go.
They compliment his mambo and say, go with God. They're essentially expediting his high-risk exit because he poses no financial claim on them. It's the ultimate failure of institutional care, all wrapped up in a veneer of polite respect for personal autonomy.
The tragicomic dissonance there is just... it's immediately overwhelming. Internally, he's ascended. He feels righter than rain, risen from the, the squalor of withdrawal, but externally.
Externally, the harsh reality is delivered so flatly. It's a good thing you can't see what you look like, though.
So the entire subjective experience is based on a lie, a visual, physical, and ultimately a neurochemical lie.
But it's a lie that's necessary for his compulsion. He needs to move. He has a mission. And he tries to maintain that illusory ascent through sheer, brutal physical effort and, again, highly specific navigation.
His objective is antitoy entertainment.
And the sources give us the exact roadmap of his desperation.
This hyper-specific geography almost functions like a prayer or a mantra. He needs to achieve kindness, pharmacological credit, and liquid assets. To do this, he has to follow 8 specific blocks east on Cambridge Street.
Then south on Prospect, through what's described as mentholated autumn air, to Inman Square. This specificity is his attempt to impose some kind of order on his internal chaos.
And you can feel the physical effort required to maintain this fragile dignity.
Oh, absolutely. The brisk click of his heels on pavement is literally the sound of his will overriding his body's screaming need to collapse.
It's closing his red leather collar, forcing his head up and staying that way on its own.
He's meeting eyes with blasé dignity. He is actively, consciously willing his external performance to match that temporary neurological high.
But the environment is constantly reminding him of the unavoidable squalor.
You can't escape it.
He's walking through the residual smells of men's room stall and subway vomit.
Mm-hmm.
So that heroic rise from the ashes is just immediately undercut by this sensory reality. The physical landscape of his addiction insists on grounding his ascent.
Yet for a moment, the seizure's aftermath does grant him this spectacular, if, delusional sense of cosmic control.
This is one of the most memorable images in the sources.
It's incredible. He looks up, sees the rind of the moon hanging cocked above a four-spired church, and the emergent stars. They feel like yo-yos.
Yo-yos.
Yeah. The source says, you feel, after a seizure, poor Tony feels as if he could cast them out, draw them in again at will.
He feels like a celestial puppeteer. He is the master of gravity, time, and space, but only temporarily.
It's the absolute peak of the delusion. But what's fascinating is how quickly that power fantasy is about to collide with the reality of just pure cellular exhaustion and compulsive need.
And that collision point is antitoy entertainment. Poor Tony's manic ascent is fueled by a very specific goal, but the sources emphasize that his arrival, it has to feel like a transaction, not a plea.
Oh, that double bind is everything. The needing charity but requiring dignity.
He's seeking kindness, pharmacological credit, and liquid assets.
But he is utterly consumed by this tension between arriving as a supplicant, which he knows would require a contemptible, withdrawn snivel for compassion, versus arriving as a client with standing. This need for dignity, even in extremis, is what's driving his every action as that high begins to dissipate.
And the physical body is already revolting against his will.
It's failing.
After only 5 blocks, the text notes the high is dissolving. He feels not so much quite ill again as just deeply tired.
And this isn't just normal tiredness. This is something else entirely. It's the post-fever, sleep for a week type cellular fatigue.
So the compulsion is now driving a body that biologically, it just demands immediate, profound rest.
The cellular exhaustion is the truth of his condition. It's the biological reality. But the compulsion for the substance just overrides that imperative. This drive is so powerful, so central to his being, that to underscore the stakes, the sources flash back to the nature of his association with the Antitoy Bros.
Which requires us to dive into one of the most absurd and detailed mercenary operations we've ever seen documented.
The infamous decoy operation.
Front Country ONAN Omanesme, poor Tony and his crew, and what a list of names. Lola's sister, Susan T. Cheese, Bridget Tenderhole.
Equus Reese Darkstar McNair. They were paid a heavily cut bundle to split 6 ways.
That meager payment just underscores the low value placed on their risk in this world of geopolitical absurdity.
Well, the absurdity starts with the uniform, which again highlights the granular specificity of their mission parameters. To create the maximum diversion, they had to be virtually indistinguishable.
They all had to wear identical red leather coats and auburn wigs and spike heels.
Can you just imagine the logistics of securing 12 identical sets of that outfit? Half for mannish-looking women, half for men performing as such. It's bizarre.
And the scene itself is a masterpiece of comic density. 12 of these identical epicene figures just milling around the Sheraton Commander Hotel lobby in Harvard Square.
And their target is specific. The Canadian Minister of Inter-ONAN Trade, who's addressing the press from a specific, elevated, leaf-shaped rostrum.
The details just keep coming.
They do, and the weapon of choice is brilliantly bizarre. It's not a bomb or a bullet. It's an androgynous Kibesser insurgent who throws foul, semi-liquid violet waste from a souvenir miniature waste displacement barrel.
Right into the minister's face. The level of detail, the color of the waste, the souvenir miniature barrel, it elevates the whole action from merely political to this, like, tragically absurd street theater.
And the decoy's job is to react by milling hysterically, dispersing in a dozen different vectors to create maximum confusion.
While the security response is, again, terrifyingly specific. White-suited men wearing earplugs.
A detail that confirms the explosive noise of the chaos.
And they're wielding highly specific weaponry. Cobra M11 subautomatics.
See, the sources don't just say machine guns. They specify the brand and model. It cements this crowded, detail-obsessed reality of their mercenary world. It was a high-stakes, low-dignity performance art, perfectly executed, for a deeply cut bundle of cash.
Now, back on Prospect Street, all that absurdity is forgotten. It's replaced by need and exhaustion. Poor Tony spots two young women just ahead of him, and he enters into this immediate, clinical, recursive debate about robbing them.
The logic of the purse snatch.
It's a cold, self-justifying audit of vulnerability.
And this is where his internal chaos manifests as this compulsive, hyper-rational logistics. He focuses obsessively on the details of the potential crime. He sees the purses hang by the flimsiest of evening gown with straps.
He performs an immediate demographic analysis, noting the duo is interracial, rare, and disquieting in Metro Boston.
Which isn't a social observation, is it? It's a calculation. It's a calculation of potential resistance, a key variable in his personal logistics audit.
His calculation of victimization is horrifyingly specific. He fixes on the white girl, assessing her weary, stolid plod and air of inattention, which he then interprets as a sign of routine victimization and demoralized lassitude.
He calculates that the state guarantees a minimum of protest or pursuit. He is coldly assessing the level of demoralization in his potential victim as a factor in his own self-preservation.
The recursive interiority is him trying to justify the act by minimizing the victim's agency.
Right, and the only counter detail that registers in his audit is purely functional. She wore formidable-looking running shoes under her tartan skirt.
Even while he's contemplating robbery, his mind is consumed by technical details and risk assessment. The question is this cold calculation an act of agency, or is it just another compulsion, as inescapable as his walk to Antitoy?
And because he's so deeply immersed in this logistical loop, this obsession with sidestepping dog droppings and calculating strap thickness, he misses the key moment.
The moment of potential intervention.
The chance for a human connection that could have halted the whole compulsion.
The narrative delivers this failure of recognition with just crushing finality.
Poor Tony, focused entirely on his interior survival audit, passes the man-o'-war grill, and he completely misses seeing his old former crewmate, Mad Matty Pemulus, a sure source of compassion.
Who is looking right out the window at him.
Aghast in recognition. But Tony is so isolated by his own recursive, self-conscious focus on the logistics of survival that he is completely blind to external reality. Even when that reality offers him salvation, his obsession is his prison.
If poor Tony's external chaos is mapped out in specific blocks and obsessive calculations, how does that hyper-specific obsession translate to the contained environment of Ennin House, the recovery community?
It's a great question.
We're transitioning now to the private language of identity and self-consciousness, starting with Jeffrey Day's granular observation about the male residents.
And we shift from the specific act of a heist calculation to the specific act of self-naming. Day, who is the chronicler here, he noted this remarkable trend among the male residents. They give their genitals special little cognomens.
Little nicknames.
Right, and this is a profound externalization of the self. They're turning a core private part into a third-party character they can discuss and relate to, maybe as a way of managing their post-addiction shame or anxiety.
And Day, who acts as this sort of sociological observer, he provides the archive of these names. Bruno, Jake, Fang, that was Minty's, the one-eyed monk,
Fritzy, Russell the love muscle. And he speculates that this might be a class thing, noting that neither he nor Yule nor Ken Herdity ever named theirs. The very act of naming seems to betray a particular kind of background or maybe a neurotic tendency.
The detail provided makes the self-consciousness almost painful to read. Duty Glenn's unit was Poor Richard, and Chandler Foss's was Bam Bam.
This isn't just naming, it's assigning a narrative and an identity. It's a psychological shield to manage the anxiety of recovery. By giving it a cognomen, they are not entirely accountable for its failures or even for its mere existence. It is something other than them.
And no resident embodies this obsessive interiority more than our lens, whose unit was known as the frightful hog.
Lands. He clearly dominated the environment, and his self-consciousness was defined entirely by this one particular physical feature.
He treated the frightful hog as a central exhibit in his life's performance.
And it was described in such great physical detail. Short, thick, blunt, and notably 2 or 3 shades darker than the rest of his skin. Lens's compulsion was to narrate his own existence, and to emphasize his points, he would literally brandish it at his roommates.
He didn't just brandish it. He codified its specific excruciating geometry. He provided the definitive, almost academic definition of what he termed the Polish curse.
Yes, and this is the absolute peak of neurotic specificity. The definition: undistinguished length but sobering circumference.
And Lens's own quote nails the tragicomic reality.
Wow.
Easy on the bottom, but tears hell out of the sides, brother.
It's a self-diagnosis of his own inherent, inescapable difficulty, delivered through the lens of performance and, a kind of physical inadequacy. He's simultaneously mocking and obsessing over the single feature he believes defines all of his relational problems.
And yet, despite Lens's irritating narcissistic behavior, Jeffrey Day, who spent all his time documenting Lens's quotations and complaining about him, finds himself in a paradox of absence.
This is such a fascinating psychological twist. Day insisted he would die before admitting he missed Lens. I mean, Lens was a terrible, noisy, chaotic roommate who was obsessed with time and patter.
Right. But when Lens was discharged and Day gained this objectively superior roommate, the quiet, thoughtful tax attorney Tiny Ewell, Day was.
He was nonplussed. He missed the chaos. He missed Lens's way of leaning upside down in his briefs, or the very act of brandishing the hog to make a point.
So even in recovery, where the goal is to define a stable new self, the neurotic structure provided by Lens's obsessive performance created a kind of certainty or a strange connection that Day now misses.
The absence of the noise feels lonelier than the noise itself.
It really does.
It just underscores how relational dynamics, especially those forged under the intense pressure of addiction and recovery, often rely on shared neurosis and structured chaos. Day misses the certainty of Lens's particular brand of performative, self-conscious agony.
Which suggests that even a negative, irritating presence can stave off the terrifying emptiness of isolation.
Exactly.
And that fear of isolation and emptiness that takes center stage as we shift to the very complex issue of depression, which is explored through the experience of Kate Gompert. The sources are absolutely rigorous in their taxonomy here, demanding we distinguish between different kinds of internal voids.
This distinction is non-negotiable for understanding the core tragedy of this material. The first void is the lower grade one, often called simple melancholy or, more clinically, anhedonia.
And this is defined as the loss of the ability to feel pleasure or attachment to things that were formerly important.
And critically, it is an emotional anesthetic.
The sources provide a suite of these illustrative examples that make this loss of affective content just painfully clear. It's not active suffering, it's a profound deadness, a hollowing out of substance.
You have to consider the specificity of the examples. The avid bowler who drops his league for kickboxing cartridges, the former joy is just abandoned for a hollow substitute, the gourmand who loses his appetite, the sensualist whose most cherished partner, his unit, becomes feelingless gristle.
But the most devastating example involved familial love.
It really does. The devoted wife viewing her family, the absolute center of her life, as simply a theorem of Euclid.
Wow.
The affection, the feeling, is stripped down to radical abstraction and logical necessity.
So the core feeling then, it's not overtly painful. It's described as emotional novocaine.
Yeah.
Its deadness is disconcerting and, well, depressing, but the lack of intensity is what really defined it.
Precisely. In the anhedonic state, all of these major concepts, happiness, joie de vivre, love, they're stripped to their skeletons and reduced to abstract ideas. They retain denotation, the dictionary definition, the concept, but they entirely lose connotation.
Emotional lived experience.
Gone. The anhedonic can talk about joy. They know the word for it, but they cannot feel it or truly believe it exists in any meaningful way.
The world, therefore, ceases to be a lived reality, and it just becomes a map of the world.
You can navigate the map, but the self has no location.
And this ties into the terminology of Boston AA, which provides a really efficient summary of this state.
In the local AA parlance, The anhedonic is unable to identify. They can't connect to the effective emotional content being shared by others because that content is simply inaccessible to them. They recognize the words, but they cannot locate the feeling on their own internal schematic.
This concept of anhedonia is then used to critique the younger ETA student's interpretation of the suicide of Dr. J.O. Incandenza, the academic father figure who, microwaved his own head.
Yes, the standard shallow take among these goal-oriented athletes is that Incandenza died from garden-variety anhedonia, the what does it all mean type crisis of middle-aged Americans.
But this presumption reveals the profound limitations of the student's own experience.
Completely. They are still entirely embedded in the external, ordinal, carrot-and-stick philosophies pushed by their Dalint-like coaches. They invoke anhedonia as a distant psychic bogey, a conceptual threat they can use to rationalize brief, token, sentimental acts.
Like pausing their path to dawn drills to smell flowers.
Exactly. They use the concept of meaninglessness as a counterpoint to their relentless drive, but it remains a total extraction for them.
For them, the idea of life lacking meaning despite achievement is still just a philosophical exercise, a textbook problem.
They still fundamentally worship the carrot. They operate under the delusive idea that the continent's second-ranked 14-year-old feels exactly twice as worthwhile as the number 4. Their self-worth is entirely numerical and external.
The source material suggests a tragicomic inverse to their philosophy, that it's more invigorating to want than to have.
They're lucky their state is temporary because the striving itself is invigorating, even if it rests on a fundamentally flawed premise of numerical value.
That's the painful reality. The minute they achieve that ultimate goal, the inherent emptiness of external validation will be waiting for them, proving their reliance on ordinal ranking to be a delusion.
But until then, they are driven by a compelling, intoxicating desire. They have not yet reached the state of Hal Incandenza's internal vacuum.
Right. Hal Incandenza, the prodigy son of the deceased filmmaker, he is our guide into the specific localized emptiness of the hyper-intellectual adolescent. Hal, living at the ETA, is certain his father's suicide wasn't standard American anhedonia, and his own internal diagnosis is devastating.
Hal represents the sophisticated, high-functioning version of emotional numbness. He acknowledges that he hasn't had a bona fide intensity of interior life-type emotion since he was tiny.
He's a functional automaton.
He is. He's capable of manipulating terms like joy and value, like they're variables in rarefied equations. He can successfully convince other people that he is in there, inside his own hull as a human being, but he knows. He knows he's far more robotic than John Wayne.
This internal vacuum generates his primary, painful relational tension with his mother, Avril Incandenza, the dean of the ETA.
Who believes she knows him inside out, that he is her internally worthy one.
But Avril is just experiencing an echo chamber.
Completely. She projects her expectations and her anxieties onto Hal, and she only hears her own echoes coming back from inside his void. And the profound irony is that this inability to be truly seen makes Hal feel the one emotion he still feels to the limit lately: loneliness.
He's trapped, encased in a self that is perceived falsely, and that false perception just compounds his sense of isolation.
Which ties directly into Hal's sophisticated theory about the societal mandate for cynicism, particularly evident in the lively arts of the millennial USA.
The culture treats this anhedonia, this internal emptiness, as hip, as cool and sophisticated, a kind of remnant of romantic Weltschmerz.
But Hal argues the core driver isn't philosophical for young people, it's social. To be cool, to be jaded, is to be admired and accepted and included and so unalone. This isn't the standard pressure of peers, it is the fundamental existential drive of peer hunger.
This peer hunger forces them into what the source calls a spiritual puberty,
where the great transcendent horror is loneliness, excluded engagement in the self. And to avoid that horror, they will wear any mask.
So they fashion a mask of ennui and jaded irony early on.
And the tragedy is that their faces, their psyches, are still fictile enough to assume the ship of that mask permanently. The result is a lasting, weary cynicism. The societal agreement is absolute. Sentiment equals naivete on this continent.
Hal synthesizes this into his own theory of the American sin, the cultural refusal to engage with genuine, unmediated feeling.
He theorizes that this hip, cynical transcendence of sentiment is really just a profound fear of being really human.
And why?
Because to be truly human, Hal believes, is to be unavoidably sentimental and naive and goo-prone and generally pathetic. To be forever infantile, a not-quite-right-looking infant dragging itself anaclitically around the map. Hal hates this vulnerable infant in himself, and that fear is what drives the construction of his robotic, cynical facade.
And this internal conflict, the desire for connection warring with the fear of vulnerability, is perfectly captured by his father, J.O. Incandenza, in his devastating film The American Century, as seen through a brick.
Yes, the film offers a visual thesis on why numb emptiness might actually be preferable to profound feeling.
It starts with purity.
Purity. A piano string vibrates a high D, sweet, unadorned solo sound. This represents pure, untainted sentiment, the unmediated, naive feeling that Hal fears so much.
Then that purity is instantly corrupted. A small, unlined, clearly infantile thumb enters the frame. The description is meticulous and disgusting. Blunt, moist, pale, dingy, with disreputable stuff crusted in one of the nail corners.
That flawed, messy human thumb touches the string and the sweet sound dies. The silence that follows is described as excruciating. The messy reality of being human kills the pure sound of sentiment.
But the film insists on going further. The thumb is removed, and the pure sound comes back.
However, now, as the volume increases, it gains this horrifying quality. It is sick sweet and overripe and potentially putrid. It grows louder and more dysphoric until the viewer is longing and even maybe praying for the return of the natal thumb to shut it up.
So the thesis is undeniable.
It is. The unmediated feeling, the raw sentiment, it's just too intense, too sick sweet to bear. The resulting silence is excruciatingly lonely. That's anhedonia. But the return of the pure sound is worse. It's actively sickening.
The conclusion drawn from this excruciating sequence is that the numb emptiness, the anhedonia, is actually preferable to the intensity of the pure true feeling.
Which means Hal is correct that standard anhedonia is not the final predator.
Hal's mistake, this source material tells us, is failing to understand that his robotic emptiness anhedonia is only a shadow of the true horror. If anhedonia is silence, the true condition is a noise so loud it shatters the skull.
He does not realize that dead-eyed anhedonia is merely a benign remora on the ventral flank of the true predator, the great white shark of pain. This condition is what authorities would term clinical depression or involutional depression or unipolar dysphoria.
But Kate Gumpert, who lives there, simply knows it as it.
It.
And this is not just sadness. This is a complete breakdown of psychic infrastructure. How is it defined in terms of raw experience?
It's defined as a level of psychic pain wholly incompatible with human life as we know it. We are talking about an experience that fundamentally registers as a sense of radical and thoroughgoing evil, not just as a feature of the world, but as the very essence of conscious existence.
The source calls it a nausea of the cells and soul.
A poisoning that operates at the most elementary biological level. And unlike anhedonia, where the world is abstracted to a map in the grip of it, the world is fully rich and animate and unmap-like.
But it is also simultaneously thoroughly painful and malignant and antagonistic to the self.
And this creates a devastating, inescapable, recursive double bind. Because the self is absorbed into this black fold of pain, any act of human agency becomes equally malign. Sitting or standing, doing or resting, speaking or keeping silent, living or dying, every single choice is not just unpleasant, but literally horrible. All alternatives are equally weighted with malignant possibility.
This radical pain creates an absolute isolating solipsism. The loneliness here is profound and incommunicable.
The person in the grip of it cannot convey the feeling, not even to another person who is herself clinically depressed.
And why is that?
Because the person cannot perceive any other person or thing, a doctor, a partner, a therapist, as existing independently of the universal pain that is digesting her cell by cell. The anhedonic inability to identify, which was just abstraction before, is now an essential mechanism of it.
Everything is part of the problem, and there is no solution. It is defined as a hell for one.
This perspective makes the term psychotic depression particularly disturbing to Kate Gumpert, who understands the terrible irony.
What's the irony?
It centers on the definition of psychosis, a break from reality. The source provides the analogy of two people screaming in pain. One screams because they are being tortured with an external electric current, so their screams are circumstantially appropriate.
Okay.
The other screams without any visible amperage, so they are diagnosed as psychotic by outside observers.
But the cruel, invisible reality that Kate Gumpert grasps is that none of the patients on the ward are truly psychotic. Their screams are entirely appropriate to certain circumstances. Part of whose special charm is that they're undetectable by any outside party.
This is the closed circuit of the pain. The current is both applied and received from within. The pain is real, it's quantifiable, it's circumstance appropriate, but because it is internal, it registers as delusion to the outside world.
And that societal failure of perception, the inability to see the pain, it must compound the agony, confirming the patient's solitary, hellish reality.
It does. And if it is the fire, then what does this radical understanding tell us about suicide? The sources provide the definitive analogy for the person in the grip of the great white shark.
Suicide caused by it, air, is not an act of hopelessness or rational accounting.
Not at all. It is not because death seems appealing. The key is the terror of falling from a burning high-rise. The person trapped up high is the one in the fire.
The analogy holds that the terror of falling remains a constant. That fear is just as great for the person trapped as for a curious bystander looking up from the sidewalk.
Exactly. The variable that changes the equation is the intensity of the fire's flames, which represent it.
So when those invisible, consuming psychic flames get close enough, the terror of falling to death becomes the slightly less terrible of two terrors.
The jump is not a desire for death. It is an automatic, involuntary flight from the fire. And this truth is what makes the experience incommunicable.
The people on the sidewalk yelling, "Don't!"
Mm-hmm.
They can't possibly understand the jump.
Because, as the text states, you'd have to have personally been trapped and felt flames to really understand a terror way beyond falling.
And if we connect this to the practical world, this profound gap in understanding renders any well-meaning suicide contract from a halfway house simply absurd.
Absolutely. Such a contract relies on rational thought and external constraints, which are instantly overridden the moment the invisible psychic flames, the circumstances of assert themselves.
If it is the great white shark, then Ernest Feaster is the living archive of sustained, unimaginable endurance against that predator.
He is a civil engineer in his 50s whom Kate Gompert encountered at Newton Wellesley Hospital. His entire story is defined by the absurd specificity of his trauma.
Feaster's case is the devastating culmination of tragicomic dissonance meeting invisible agony. The trigger for his 17 straight years of depression beyond all human endurance was unbelievably precise.
20 years ago, he slipped on a patch of 3-in-1 brand oil from his model train tracks and bumped his head on the cement floor of his basement rec room in Wellesley Hills.
The specificity is almost agonizing in its detail. The suburb, the cement floor, the brand of oil. A mundane domestic accident leading to a psychically apocalyptic result that lasted nearly 2 decades.
And his enduring hobby, the construction of incredibly intricate systems of switching and track for Lionel Trains Inc., serves as the perfect visual contrast to his internal state.
His wife, a model of sustained devotion, brought photographs of these painstaking railroad networks into the locked ward, trying to maintain a physical connection to the man he was supposed to be.
But despite the constant consuming psychic fire of it, Feaster maintained an external life of immense discipline. He kept his job, his devotion to his wife, and his daily Catholic Mass, where he would silently pray for unconsciousness without end.
But the full arsenal of modern chemistry and electricity failed him entirely.
This exhaustive treatment history serves as a powerful critique of the limits of contemporary neuroscience. They threw the entire pharmacological alphabet at him. Tricyclics, MAOIs, insulin comas, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and the side effect-laden quadricyclics.
They scanned his lobes and effective matrices for lesions and scars. Nothing worked, not even high amperage ECT.
Electroconvulsive therapy, often the clinical last resort for refractory depression, and even that offered no relief.
So this failure confirms the source's conclusion that some cases of depression are simply beyond human aid.
A psychic wound that chemistry and electricity cannot touch. And this is the truth that gave Kate Gompert the howling fantods. The idea of this squat, dead-eyed man continuing to work, maintaining his meticulous model train hobby in the silence of his wood-paneled rec room, all while his head was full of poison and worms.
His desperate hope, therefore, was not for recovery, but for total permanent escape into numbness.
The ultimate dream of anhedonia.
His final goal was a radical new type of psychosurgery on Long Island, where they supposedly yanked out your whole limbic system, the seat of all sentiment and feeling.
His fondest wish was complete psychic numbing, or death in life. The prospect of total, surgically induced anhedonia, the world as Euclid's theorem, was the dangled carrot that kept him hanging onto the windowsill by his black and gnarled fingernails.
He chose the complete absence of feeling over the constant presence of fire.
Absolutely.
And the final, excruciating detail that seals this archive of endured agony is the Christmas card the Feaster sent to Kate Gompert.
Out of genuine, devout, and profound love, the feaster sent Kate Xmas cards for 2 years, wishing her all available joy.
But the cards themselves featured excruciating little watercolor pictures of locomotives on them.
The object of his quiet, sustained, agonizing endurance, the model trains, is accidentally weaponized by the very love that was trying to sustain him. Kate could barely stand to think about them, even at the best of times, because they represented that constant, silent contrast between external discipline and internal torment.
And the outcome of Mr. Feaster's potential psychosurgery is left unknown, leaving the archive open-ended. Did he achieve the numb emptiness he yearned for?
We don't know if he achieved anhedonia, but the power of that final, specific detail is that it shows how external acts of profound kindness and connection, when they're filtered through radical, isolated psychic pain, become instruments of torment. The specific details of life, whether it's a Cobra M11 subautomatic or a watercolor locomotive, become unavoidable parts of the universal problem.
We began this deep dive with poor Tony Krauss, high on a deceptive neurological euphoria, performing the parodic minimal mambo and feeling like a cosmic puppeteer. We tracked the recursive chaos that led him to contemplate a specific, calculated crime.
And we finish with Ernest Feaster, defined by the specific brand of oil that catalyzed his 17 years of silent, continuous suffering, quietly laying toy track while every cell in his body screamed from internal flames.
It's a journey across the full, agonizing spectrum of the human mind under pressure.
The crucial lesson here, for anyone trying to understand the human condition, is the need for radical differentiation in analyzing these internal states. We have to distinguish absolutely between the anesthetic quality of anhedonia, the world as a schematic map, the self as robotic, and the consuming fire of it.
Where the world is fully rich, animate, and directed entirely toward one's destruction, leading to that terrifying, closed-circuit loneliness.
The most profound human suffering is often the most specific, invisible, and incommunicable.
And the narrative emphasizes that regardless of the absurdity of the external world, whether it's the logistics of a decoy operation, the geometry of the Polish curse, or the failure of the entire pharmacological alphabet, the granular internal reality is inescapable. Isolation is maintained by relentless specificity.
And if we connect this one last time to that pervasive societal hunger for the hip, cynical mask that Helen Condensa diagnosed, the fear of being sentimental and goo-prone, it raises a final provocative thought for you, the learner.
Hal theorized that we are all, beneath the sophisticated facade, a not-quite-right-looking infant. Given that constant drive to filter out anything that seems naive or pathetic, what small, genuinely sentimental or specific observation about your own life, something you would usually mask with irony or self-judgment, might actually be the most honest, least filtered metric of your actual interior life?
What is the feeling you are most afraid to admit you lack? Or, conversely, what is the raw, pure sound you are most afraid to admit you possess? What is the feeling that you are constantly fighting to silence with your own natal thumb of cynicism, knowing that the resulting silence may be more excruciating than the original intensity? This is the starting point for truly identifying with the deep dives of human experience.